Mother freaking apocalypse, brah. The mother freaking apocalypse, and it's happening now, right here in front of your freaking eyes, brother. Right in front of your freaking eyes. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Apocalypse Humpday. Yeah, that means we're halfway through the week, and we had a short week, so good stuff, right? All right. Apocalypse Humpday. Brad, what the heck is it all about? Well, let me tell you. Every Wednesday, I've been reading a one of my stories regarding the apocalypse, and we have been kind of slowly making our way to my zombie apocalypse novel called Zechariah 14:12, Humanity's Last Stand. That came out 2012, I believe, is when I wrote that. It has something to do when I was getting divorced. Anyhow, yeah, so the whole book came about. I had written a short story in one of my books. I believe it was Midnight Snacks. And it was called The Last Stronghold. And those of you out there who frequently read my books said, hey, you should really turn that into a novel. And I said, how do you, hey, what's up, Kevin, you made her. I said, how do you write a novel about the zombie apocalypse? I mean, something escapes out of a lab, boom, boom, somebody gets bit, and then it's world's widespread. But anyhow, I sat down and tackled the project, and next thing you know, I had a bunch of chapters done. And we have what we have gotten to tonight, which is Zechariah 14:12. So, yeah, we do this every Wednesday, and we will get through the whole book. And I did write a sequel to it. It's a short story. It's kind of a continuing story of what happened to the family that I'm going to read about. The book takes place in Minnesota, of course. I try to make all my stories happen in Minnesota, kind of like Stephen King does with Maine. This one takes place in the city of Fair Lakes, Minnesota, which is inconspicuously, it's Fairmont, Minnesota, where I grew up. So, I didn't grow up there, but I spent a lot of my life there with my buddy Kevin. So, anyhow, without further ado, if we'll get to that after I get done reading. Let's do that. Yeah, we'll do all that other stuff after I get done reading. So let's just jump into the book tonight, because I'm a bit tired. That's why I'm drinking coffee. So yeah. All right. Zechariah 14:12. Salud. Dedication. Probably one of the most influential moments in my young writing life was when my mom took me, my older brother Nate, and my older sister Odette to the Lucky Twin Drive-In in Burnsville, Minnesota. They played triple bills there that night, and we watched the movies The Brood, Rabid, and George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead. It was then that the nightmare began. I would have several nightmares into adulthood about zombie apocalypses. Many of those nightmares culminated into the pages beyond here. I'd like to thank the following people for inspiration, advice, encouragement, and basically just humoring an aspiring writer. I want to thank Mom for the love of all things horror and paranormal. I want to thank my dad for taking me to horror movies even though he didn't like them. He just wanted to spend time with me. Friends and family for buying my books. Todd S. for the ham radio lessons. My beta readers Carrie H., Ken H., and Mike E. And my wife, at the time, Susan, for editing some of the important details on procedure and medicine. And I also want to thank the NSA for not arresting me, because I can't imagine what my Google search history must have looked like in their eyes when I was researching this book. And also want to thank Stephen King for proving words can be scarier than film. And this shall be the plague, wherewith Jehovah will smite the peoples that have warred with Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their sockets, and their tongues shall consume away in their mouths. Zechariah 14:12. Then I will do this to you. I will bring upon you sudden terror, wasting diseases and fever that will destroy your sight and sap your strength. You will plant seed in vain because your enemies will eat it. Leviticus 26:16. It eats away parts of his skin. Death's firstborn devours his limbs. Job 18:13. Chapter 1. They were in the middle of a kiss, a prelude to a lucky night of lovemaking. The kids were at their grandmother's house. Chris was put on call from the hospital. In that mesmerizing moment when thoughts arouse the senses, and it is only a matter of time before clothes are removed in a hurry and communication becomes a system of groans and grunts, the cell phone goes off. The arousal is fading away like morning mist. Len knows that ringtone. It's the hospital. Hello? Chris answers in frustration. Oh my God, why did you answer it? Len moans from behind her. Shush, she scolds and then back into the phone. What? Oh, wow. Okay, I'll be there as soon as I can. Okay, I won't. Bye. I know, you gotta go in, Len whimpers in defeat. Chris hurriedly pulls on her hospital scrubs. The look on her face is grim. What's up, hon? Huh? Nothing. Really? 'Cause the look on your face says otherwise. Oh, well, was just looking forward to a night off. Len didn't buy it, but didn't bother to keep at it. Chris held close to the hospital's policy of keeping discreet about patients and other things regarding her job as an RN, and he admired her for it. But he did detect an expression of fear on her face. You want me to go make a pot of coffee or something before you go? Len asked. No, thank you. She gave him a brief smile and rested her hand on his stubbly cheek. I really have to get going. I wish the kids were here so I could say goodnight to them. You'll see them tomorrow. Maybe we'll make you breakfast when you get off work tomorrow morning. We'll see. They sound pretty busy at the hospital. That last kiss wasn't passionate. It was filled with sadness. Len was up at 9:15 a.m., not by an alarm, but because the usual shuffling of clothes and a freshly showered scent of his wife was not next to him. Chris must have worked late, to his disappointment. He shuffled his way into the bathroom and took his morning pee, washed his hands, and then splashed some soapy water onto his face to clear the sleep from his eyes. He dried himself and then walked out into the living room. The family dog, a border collie mix named Jack, lifted his old tired head and his tail thumped on his pet pillow. Just you and me this morning, bud, Len mumbled to his dog, and then he started to make coffee. He routinely whistled for Jack, and they both went out the back door into the yard so Jack could take his own morning pee. The air smelled like smoke, and at first he thought it was someone burning leaves. But he looked around, and the sky looked hazy, and there was a black smoke coming from the south and also from the west. Someone having a barbecue? He joked to Jack, who had his nose in the air as well. He heard a rustle of leaves from behind the garage, and Jack immediately started barking. Jack, knock it off. He walked over to the back of the garage and noticed his neighbor Steve kind of stumbling around. Steve? Jack's hair rose on his neck, and he stood his ground, growling at his neighbor. Jack, back off. Steve, are you okay? You don't look so. Steve ran at Jack and smothered him. To Len's horror, he bared his teeth and bit into Jack's ear. Jack howled and whined in pain. What the fuck are you doing? Len ran over and tried to pull Steve off his dog. There was a flap of Jack's ear hanging from his teeth, and he snarled at Len. Get off my dog, psycho! Steve buried his teeth into the side of Jack's face, and his dog howled again in pain, trying to wriggle from Steve's grip. Len grabbed a large rock from his garden. Get off my dog, now, Steve! Steve dug his hand into the soft part of Jack's neck and pulled out a big sack of bloody tissue, and his dog's howl gurgled and then stopped. Just before Len struck Steve in the face with the rock, Steve put the dog's meat into his mouth. Jesus! Len cried and struck Steve several times until he rolled off Jack. Steve's body laid there twitching, and he looked at his dog. Jack's legs were splayed out as if he were in mid-jump and fell over sideways. A ragged ear, a torn face showing his facial muscles and teeth, and a large hole where his best friend's throat once was already coagulating with blood. Jack! He began to cry. Jesus! Jack! He heard growling coming from behind the garage where Steve had come from. It was a human growl. He stood up from his knees and backed away, keeping his eyes on the source of the growling. A couple he had never seen before came shambling around the corner. They looked to have been an elderly couple, but something was wrong with their faces. They were almost a bluish gray, with their veins spider-webbed in their skin. When they spotted Len, they began to walk faster. Who are you? He asked with his heart in his throat. Only a gurgling growl came from one of their throats. Something in their eyes looked hungry. Len grabbed the metal rake Chris had left in the yard from yesterday. He swung it at them, and they only tried to grab it at it. Get the fuck back! He swung again and connected with the old man's head. He groaned and fell on his side. She moved forward, and he caught her in the backswing. She fell backwards but kept on her feet. She jumped at him, with her teeth snapping at his face. He noticed some of them were missing. Son of a bitch! He threw her back onto her male counterpart, and he ran up the back steps. He closed the back door behind him and slid the deadbolt in place. He could hear them moaning on the other side of the door. He looked out the window and saw them pulling Jack's body apart and eating it. He ran to the front door and locked it and pulled the sheer curtains shut in the living room and kitchen. Len looked for his phone, which was plugged into the bathroom outlet, charging. He turned it on and seen he had 12 texts from Chris. 1:23 a.m. Len, call me as soon as possible. 1:25 a.m. Jesus, Len, please wake up and call me. 1:27 a.m. You need to get the kids. 1:32 a.m. Len, this is serious. 1:45 a.m. Turn on the news. 2:01 a.m. Did my mom call you? 2:13 a.m. Please call me as soon as you get this message. 2:45 a.m. I don't know if your phone is off, but you need to get the kids. 3 a.m. We're really busy at the hospital. Just try to get the kids and text me back. 3:30 a.m. Len, I'm scared. Please call me back. 4:06 a.m. I'm going to try to make it home. Wait for me. 4:22 a.m. I love you. Len dialed her number. We're sorry. All lines are busy. Please hang up and try your call later. Velocity Wireless. He tried again and got the same recording. He then dialed his mother-in-law. He got the same recording. He cursed under his breath and then heard a loud bang at his living room window. More of those things, roughly 5 of them, gathered there, smearing up his windows. Shit. He ran into the kitchen and grabbed a butcher knife. His entire backyard was crowded with these things. There was no sign of Jack, only a smear where his dog had laid. He checked the lock on the back door, and then the living room window banged again, and he heard it begin to splinter. He dialed 911. He only got a busy tone and a hang-up. He heard another window break in his oldest daughter's room, and then growling. He ran down the hall to her room, and those things were trying to get in. He swung the butcher knife into one dressed like a butcher. The blade went in clean, but stuck into his skull. It shrieked and then fell forward, resting on the windowsill. Len pulled the door closed and ran into the utility closet where he kept his tools. He brought out a bungee cord and wound it around his daughter's doorknob and then around his own bedroom doorknob so they couldn't open the doors. The front door began to bang and shake. He looked out the tiny window near the top of it and saw a large crowd of them trying to gain entrance. He grabbed another knife in the kitchen, and then the living room window crashed in with 4 of those things trying to wriggle their way up and into his house. Oh my God! He grabbed the step stool from the utility closet and dragged it into the hallway just below the attic door. He then grabbed a box of nails and a hammer from his toolbox as 2 of these things came in through the living room window. Jesus shit! He cried. He cried out, hopping up onto the step stool and popping up the attic door. He attempted to lift himself into it, but missing the last 4 months at the gym and eating a few too many Whoppers left him weaker than he had been. He heard one of them screech as they caught sight of him. It gave him the adrenaline to pull himself up. He hooked his foot around the stool and lifted it up with him. There were more in his house, and they were trying to grab at him. He put the attic door in place, found the nails he had thrown up there, and his hammer, and sealed the door closed. He heard his house being ransacked by these horrors walking around with human skin. He dialed his wife's cell phone again. 4 rings. "Len?" It was her voice, scared and hoarse with panic, but it was her beautiful voice. "Honey?" He choked a few tears. "Are you okay? I'm sorry I didn't get your messages. Did you get the kids?" "No. I'm holed up in the hospital. It's not safe out there. I was hoping you got them." "I can't even get to the truck." A million things were racing through his head. "I'm in the attic. I don't understand what's happening. Jack is dead, and Steve, he Len, listen," she said through a worried voice. "I don't know what's happening either. There's military all over the place. Infected people are attacking other people. It's crazy. Some virus has run rampant here. The military has us quarantined. Did you get a hold of your mom?" "No. God, I hope the kids are okay." "I'll get them. I just don't know how yet." "Len, be careful." "You too, honey. I wish you were here." "I'm safer than you. At least I have the military around me, and the infected in the hospital have been, well, disposed of." "I love you, Chris." "I love you too. You get the kids and my mom, and you all come here." "Okay." There was a click, and then Len had to plan. He needed clothes. He was only in his boxers, a t-shirt, and barefoot. He walked over to where his room would be, and he used the butcher knife to cut a slit into his bedroom ceiling, big enough for him to see into. The room was empty, and the door, as far as he could tell, was still secure. Using the knife, he sawed a square over the area of his dresser. He lowered himself onto it, trying not to alert those things out in the hallway. But there was so much growling and smashing out there, he didn't think they would hear him. He grabbed socks, pants, a shirt, and a hooded sweatshirt. He looked out his bedroom window, the driveway on that side of the house, and he could crawl out of his window and make it to his truck if it weren't for those things walking around in his driveway. He could hear screams from their other neighbors, and he grimaced. He threw his clothes up into the attic and got up on top of his dresser just as something began trying to open the bedroom door. He pulled himself up and hastily got dressed. He walked over to where the kitchen would be. He cut another slit in the ceiling and peeked through. 5 of them were just standing still in his kitchen facing the living room. He slowly sawed another hole in the ceiling, just slightly larger than his fist. The discarded sheetrock dropped to the counter, and he looked through to see if they were paying attention to him. 2 of them remained, and the other 3 shambled into the living room. Len reached down and opened the cupboard as quiet as he could. He felt around and made purchase with a can of green beans. He reached down and grabbed another can which contained mandarin oranges. He grabbed a box of saltines but couldn't fit it through the hole, so he set it back and pulled out 2 individual packages. He reached down and found 2 cans of tuna. As he brought them up, something cold and clammy locked onto his forearm. "Jesus!" he screamed and tried to pull his hand back, but it wouldn't budge. The thing had a vice-like grip on him. He felt himself getting pulled through the hole. Jagged nails ripped into his skin, and he screamed again. There were 2 sets of hands trying to pull him down out of the ceiling. His head and shoulders were pulled through, and his face was just above their heads. They were trying to bite into his arm. He swung the butcher knife down into one of their eyes, and it fell over. He slashed the other one, and it stuck in its nasal cavity. He yanked himself up, wincing at the fire of pain that shot up from his wound on his forearm. He used his t-shirt to wrap around it, and then put all the food in his sweatshirt pockets. Below, the crowd of monsters had gathered at the hole in the ceiling, trying to climb up. He ran to the side of the house where the driveway was. He used his hammer to pound out the boards on the roof. He had bashed a hole big enough to fit through, and he was on the roof. The fresh air felt good in his face and in his lungs, but that burning scent was high in the air, and he coughed. Len looked over his neighborhood. These things were roaming the streets and yards looking for food. He saw some people, whom he assumed weren't infected, running in between the houses. Another infected man was running with his son across the street from him. "Look out!" Len shouted at them. A group of 3 came from the alleyway and tackled them down. He heard them ripping and tearing their skin. He heard their screams being silenced as they were eaten alive. He looked over the edge where his Jeep Cherokee sat parked. The kids liked to play in his Jeep and would sometimes leave the lights on and the sunroof open. The sunroof was open. He had left his keys in the kitchen, but he knew he had a spare in the Jeep's glove box. He just didn't know if he could jump down onto the truck's roof and into the sunroof without any contact with those things. The thought of that clammy, dead skin touching his made his own skin crawl. The majority of them had gone over to pick over the leftover limbs of the father and son. He used that break to jump down onto the roof. It bent inward under his weight, but he was still able to slide into the sunroof without being noticed until he was inside. He immediately locked the doors and tore up the glove box for his spare key, while a crowd began to gather around him. He found the key and cranked the ignition over. It roared to life, and he slammed it into reverse. The Jeep threw people aside, and some were crunched beneath the tires. He pulled his way down Druid Street, ricocheting the monstrosities off his bumper. He thought about driving through town to see how bad things were, but instead he turned left and out onto the main highway, north towards his mother-in-law's farm. Clicking the Bluetooth button on his steering wheel, he tried to dial his mother-in-law, Grace. That same annoying recording telling him the lines were busy came across. He ended the call and came to a sudden stop. There was a line of cars as far as his eyes could see, all of them at a standstill. There weren't any infected that he could see on the road, but there were some cars that were tipped on their sides, with partially eaten bodies hanging out of the wreckage. Len clicked on the radio. "Stated in a press conference this morning from an unknown location. I repeat, the president has declared martial law in larger municipalities. The public is urged to remain in their homes, securing all doors and windows. You are safest in rural areas. Authorities urge the public not to let anyone who appears infected to have any contact with them, as this virus is highly contagious. The news of rural areas being safer than city limits was a small relief. Grace lived in a small acreage 17 miles north of Fair Lakes. We will be broadcasting reports throughout the crisis from our underground KFMT studios. This is Hal Iverson. Keep us tuned in. Suddenly, a rumble shook the road. People were looking frantically from left to right when a loud roar of a train whistle ripped through the air and a Sioux Line engine rocketed through the cars and trucks that were at a standstill on the tracks. There were only 4 cars attached to the engine, and they were bouncing dangerously off the tracks until one came loose and bounced off some of the vehicles ahead of him, which erupted into an explosive plume as the train car skidded into the 3M factory to his right. He drove off to the shoulder and down into the ditch. He drove his way around the traffic and carnage over the now vacant tracks. By the looks of things, he was going to be four-wheeling it for a while until the road looked clear. He felt the heat from the 3M fire through his windows as he drifted past the chaos. There were scattered groups of infected, some attacking standstill vehicles, some trying to get into gas stations and the local McDonald's. When he came up to Interstate 90, he saw that there was a large exodus of people trying to head both east and west. He yanked the steering wheel to the right and into the Walmart parking lot. He made a mental note to stop here for more supplies after he got to his daughter's. He took the dirt roads to his mother-in-law's. His throat was tight and stomach was a mess from nerves. He had enough problems dealing with infected people at his own home. He only hoped they fared better since she lived in the country. His heart stopped when he pulled up the long driveway. Grace had 2 fainting goats, Frank and Hugh. They were lying half-eaten on her steps as if they were attacked trying to get back into the house. The double garage door was caved in as if a crowd had pushed it in. "No!" he screamed to himself, trying to hold his tears in. He swung the Jeep around and backed it into the cement slab in front of the breezeway so he could escape in a rush. He grabbed the hammer he had on the passenger seat and went into the breezeway. The window on the door to get into Grace's house was smashed out, and the door had been cracked off its hinges. "Oh, God, please," he murmured to himself. He scanned the laundry room and he didn't see any signs of his family and noticed the door into the kitchen was still intact and secure. The knob turned, but the door was being blocked by something on the other side. He rapped on the door. "Lee! Catherine! Grace!" No answer. He put the claw of his hammer into the crease of the door and pried the wood away from the section of door. "Kids? Grace?" There were 2 planks that were nailed against the door to keep it shut. He carefully crawled through the opening and rolled onto the hardwood of the kitchen floor. He immediately stood up and listened for any signs of movement within the house. He noticed briefly that Grace's boxer, Arnie, wasn't around. Nothing. He walked into the living room and noticed the armoire was lying on its side by the front window, which was busted out from the outside. There were shotgun holes in 2 areas of the far wall, and the windows on that side were blown out. "Grace?" Len checked the spare room, and it was dark. The light switch didn't work, and the windows were covered with plywood. He went back into the kitchen and then into the hallway that connected the bathroom, another spare room and Grace's bedroom. He opened the door to the spare room, and drawn on the wall with crayon was his oldest daughter's handwriting. "Check the barn." Len ran back into the kitchen, and when he got to the breezeway, an infected person was roaming around in between him and his Jeep. It was female, and her body was in a state of decay. He scanned the area around his Jeep and didn't see any others. Sprinting from the breezeway, he swung the hammer at a side arc and caved in the thing's head on the side. It screeched and then fell limp onto the ground. He kept going until he got into his Jeep. It started and he drove around the back of the house where the barn stood. There were roughly 9 of those things stumbling around in the dooryard. He maneuvered the Jeep around so that he struck every one. When he pulled into the barn, he heard his daughter screaming for him. Joy rose up in his chest, and he looked around for them when he got out. "Daddy!" Catherine cried. "Up here!" All 3 were huddled up in the hayloft. They still had their pajamas on, and Grace had her shotgun at the ready. "You guys all right?" he shouted up to them. "We're scared," they answered in chorus. "Grace, you okay?" he asked his mother-in-law. She was a tough woman, raised her 5 kids on her own after her husband had died. "I'm okay," she answered uneasily. "Have you spoke with my daughter?" "Yep. She told me to come and get you guys and bring you all to the hospital." "Is Mom okay?" Lee asked. "She's fine, girls. Come on now. Come on down from there, and we can get out of here before any more of those things show up." Grace dragged the ladder she had pulled up there and began to slide it down when 2 infected people wandered into the barn and grabbed Len. "Daddy, look out!" Lee screamed. He hit one of them with the hammer, but the other grabbed a hold of his wounded forearm and tried to chew through the shirt he had wrapped around it. He gave it 2 blows to the skull until it fell dead on the ground. Another walked its way into the barn, and Grace hit it with the shotgun blast that mutilated its head. "Come on, hurry," he motioned for them after he opened the doors to the Jeep. When both girls made it down the ladder, he squeezed them both as hard as he could until he was interrupted by Grace. "Len, look out!" she shouted. There were 3 more of those things that were coming at him and his daughters. The lead one was shot in the head, and the second lost its arm and shoulder with a shotgun blast. The other just caught the ends of Catherine's hair as she made it inside the Jeep with a screech. Len hit it between the eyes with the hammer. "Come on now, Mom. It's your turn," he urged Grace. She threw her 12-gauge down to Len, and she descended the ladder. The one with the missing shoulder got back up, and Len shot it in the face, putting the thing back down. Grace made it into the Jeep, and Len drove it through the opposite wall into the bean field behind it. The field was crawling with the infected, at least over 30 of them wandering through the crops. "Any idea what the hell is going on out there?" Grace asked, buckling herself in. "Only what I've heard on the radio," Len answered, "and that isn't much. Chris said there was some virus outbreak making people like this. It's going on all over the country. The National Guard has built a stronghold around the hospital, and it's under quarantine. She said it's the safest place right now." "She must be worried sick." Len hit the Bluetooth button on his steering wheel again. "Number, please," said the polite voice. "Chris, mobile," Len spoke into the mic on his visor. "Dialing Chris on mobile." There was a click and a beep. "We're sorry. All cellular lines are down. We apologize for the inconvenience. Message 459, Velocity Wireless." "Shit," he muttered under his breath. He looked in the rearview mirror and saw both his girls holding each other and crying silently into each other's shoulders. His heart broke as he kept on driving south back to Fair Lakes. Distantly, he heard the alarm of the EBS from the speakers, and he turned it up. A robotic voice spoke. "This is an alert from your emergency broadcast system. This is not a test. Please stay tuned for further instructions. This is an alert from your emergency broadcast system." "This is Hal Iverson from the KFMT studios in Fair Lakes, Minnesota. I've just received a wire from the General Petrov of the National Guard Unit, Red Bulls. We are now under martial law. There have been 3 official safe zones set up in Moon Valley County. If you are near these areas, you are urged to get to these safe zones as soon as possible. If you can bring any supplies, you are urged to do so. In Fair Lakes, go to the Fair Lakes Healthcare Facility. That's the Fair Lakes Healthcare Facility located on State Street. In Friendly, go to the Moon Valley West Middle School building. That's the Moon Valley West Middle School building located on Oak Cliff Avenue in Friendly. There is also a safe zone set up at the Moon Valley National Guard Armory located between Friendly and Fair Lakes on Highway 16. Please go to these areas immediately. If you are in a secure area with supplies, then stay where you are, and the guard will attempt to find you after the area has been secured. There are rumors that a civilian safe zone has been established at the Federated Ethanol plant west of town, and also at the nearby factory of Waymore Limited, but these are rumors and unconfirmed. The public is also urged not to come into contact with the infected. The virus is thought to be highly contagious and has infected formerly uninfected people through biting and blood exposure. This is Hal Iverson of KFMT Radio repeating. On either side of the road, there were cars and SUVs that were ravaged by the infected hordes. Blood puddled and pooled on the road and on the vehicles. Bits and hunks of things that were once human littered the wreckages and highway. "Don't look at it," Len said to his silent daughters. "Gives a whole new meaning to riding shotgun, doesn't it?" Grace tried to joke, holding her shotgun. They got to the Walmart parking lot, and the building was burning. The front entrances were blown out, and many infected were either wandering the parking lot or eating people in their little hungry packs they seemed to like to travel in. "I guess this is a bust," Len said, defeated. "What were you going to do here?" Grace asked. "I was hoping to pick up some supplies." "Daddy, where's Jack?" Catherine asked. "Is he still at home?" He wasn't prepared for that question, so he hesitated for a long while. "He was attacked, honey," he said, anticipating a cry, but he never got one. She only sat back there in shocked silence. "Arnie got eaten, too," Grace said without looking at him. He shuddered, thinking about everything the kids must have witnessed so far. "Better head for the hospital, I guess," he finally said. He went through town. Every business was either burning or broken into. The city was a chain of 5 lakes that ran through the center of it. They could see a bunch of people on boats anchored in the deepest parts, trying to stay away from the infected. They crossed a small bridge that went across a narrow channel joining Crescent Lake with Apex Lake. The channel was clogged with a speedboat and 2 pontoons of people who were ambushed in the channel by the infected. The boats just floated there, stained with blood and gore. Passing a few neighborhoods, he saw the American Legion, which was a small building with a hall in back. Pickup trucks were parked in a defensive circle around it like a fortress. Men and women alike were on the back of these trucks, holding weapons. He pulled in, noticing a few of those weapons pointed at him. "I'm headed for the safe zone with my family if anyone needs a ride," he asked out his window. "Are you talking about the hospital, mister?" one of the men asked. He was wearing camouflage top to bottom with a hooded mask over his head. "Yeah. It's gone, man. It fell about an hour ago." "What?" Panic rose in his throat. That's impossible. They just announced it over the radio that it was a safe zone." A man in navy blue scrubs walked forward. "No, it's true. I barely got out of there myself." "But my wife..." He paused, knowing the kids were listening in. "My wife works there. She was there. I talked to her this morning." "I'm sorry, sir. But I was working there this morning, too. After the power went out, the infected we had in quarantine got out. We had them in a locked hall, but the doors used power locks on them. And when the power goes out, they open. They spread faster than the military could get the generators going for backup. There was a lot of bloodshed." Do Do you know if my wife got out too? He asked with some doubt in his voice. Her name is Chris. Chris Emerson. I know Chris, but I didn't see if she got out or not. I'm sorry, but it was so chaotic. You and your family are welcome to stay here if you want. The guy in camouflage spoke up. Thank you, but I've got to find my wife. If any of you want to ride to the next safe zone. No thanks, Camo Guy said. We've all got vehicles if we need them. Think we'll hold up here. Glenn thanked them again and drove on to the hospital. They pulled into the lot, and the hospital was smoking. There were half-eaten dead bodies all over the place. Oh my God, he said, choking again. Len, Grace put her hand on his. We don't know if any of those bodies are hers. Daddy, is Mommy okay? Catherine asked. He pushed the Bluetooth button again and asked the polite computerized voice to dial his wife's mobile phone. Again, the message that all lines were down came back to him. Damn it, he said, smashing his phone several times on the steering wheel, and then chucked it out the window. Dad? Lee wondered from the back. He sniffed in the tears that were starting to pour from his eyes and put the Jeep into gear, and they started driving slowly through the lot. The occasional infected would come up to the Jeep, and he sped up and ran them over. After an hour of checking every body, he came to the conclusion that none of them were her. Even the condition of some of the dead's faces, he could tell from their bodies that they weren't her. A small hope glimmered in his chest. What now? Grace asked with a kind glance. We go to the armory, he said confidently. I'm sure she's left with the convoy that evacuated this place, and that has to be the next place they'd go to. Are we going to find Mom? Lee spoke up from the back. Yes, honey, we're going to find Mom, he answered, looking into her brown eyes through the rearview mirror. Catherine had a light smile on her face, and they moved back into town to get to Highway 16. All right, that is Chapter 1. So, and we have begun the zombie apocalypse in Fair Lakes, Minnesota. So, I hope you guys enjoyed that one. We're going to be doing Chapter 2 next Wednesday. Yeah, next Wednesday at 9 o'clock. So, I hope to see you guys there. If you missed any parts of this broadcast or whatever, you can always replay any of the videos on the b.hive page here. You can also go to YouTube as well. My YouTube channel is youtube.com/Bradley Bodeker. Yeah, that's what it is. So, anyhow, thank you guys for watching and hanging out and going through the zombie apocalypse with me. It's been a lot of fun. And thank you guys for liking my stuff, listening to my stuff, and interacting with me. I hope you liked it, Kevin. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I like reading to you guys, and I think it helps me write as well. So, yeah, check out the YouTube thing. Please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends about what I'm doing, and if there's something they're interested in. Again, me reading my books, it's kind of like having an audiobook handy. You know, you guys get an audiobook, a free audiobook, I must add, of my stuff. So, and you can listen to it when you're driving or whatever. So, anyhow, that's what I got. We will be back on Tuesday. On Tunes for Tuesday, I'm going to be doing some Tom Petty for you. Then, and I created it as an event. As far as Theater Thursday goes, still not sure how I'm going to do that, but I might have a little something up tomorrow. I might post maybe a clip from one of the plays I've been doing or have done with the Blue Earth Town and Country Players. Yeah, I'm still got to work on that. But anyhow, thanks again, you guys, and I hope you have a good night. No nightmares. Yeah. All right. I love you guys. Again, thanks for hanging out. Peace, love, and zombies. Zombies.